You get off my property right now, or I'm calling the police. That's the first thing I ever said to Brenda, and honestly, I should have stuck with it. One morning, this official-looking envelope showed up on my porch, heavy with the kind of threat you can smell a mile away, like the sour tang of a storm rolling in. I always figured owning my grandfather's lake cabin meant fishing, bonfires, and maybe a leaky roof here and there, not all-out war, with a power-hungry HOA president who suddenly claimed my inherited cabin and the whole cove were hers to rule. But she didn't know my granddad had buried a secret in those old deeds, something strong enough to turn her grand plans into rubble. I'd had that place a decade, long enough for the porch to sag and the logs to fade to the color of driftwood, but it was Minea's slice of quiet cut from the chaos. Our side of Lake Crestwood was all wild pine and loons at sunrise, the water flat as hammered tin. Across the cove, though, they put up Crestwood bluffs, modern boxes, lawns cut with military precision, the kind of place where the HOA sent out newsletters like battle orders. We coexisted, sort of. Their jet skis tore up my glassy morning sometimes, but I kept to my side, and for years that was enough. That letter changed everything. It was stamped with the Crestwood Bluffs logo, signed in this spidery script by Brenda, who I hadn't even met yet, and it told me my dock was unauthorized. My property was now under their guidelines, and oh, by the way, I owed $500 for a new permit just to access my own water. I actually laughed when I read it. Yeah, that happened. My dock, the one my grandfather built with his own two hands, unauthorized. I crumpled up the letter and pitched it in the trash. Figured it was a paperwork screw-up. But then another letter arrived, this time with threats of fines and a demand to meet. That's when I met Brenda. Crisp white pants, pressed blouse, face like she just smelled bad cheese. She strode right up my driveway like she owned the joint. "I'm Brenda, president of the HOA," she said, all ice and condescension. I told her straight I wasn't joining her HOA. I'd never signed a thing, and my land was private. She got this little smirk, told me, "Oh, but it is now. Your property line ends at the water. The whole cove belongs to us." My stomach dropped. I told her my grandfather bought the land, the shoreline, even part of the lake. She shook her head, waved a glossy plat map, claimed the lake was a community asset, and my dock was a liability. She wanted it gone, or brought up to code. I told her to get off my property. She looked shocked, took a bunch of photos on her phone like she was documenting a crime scene, then sashayed back up the hill. That night, I drove to my uncle's place, the only other person alive who'd remember those old stories. He leaned back, sipped his coffee, told me how my grandfather bought the lake rights outright from the quarry owner before the place even had a name, just to keep developers away. But stories aren't enough. I needed proof. Back at the cabin, I tore through the attic cobwebs, old fishing lures, a trunk full of junk. Then, buried deep, I found a small leather box locked. The key? Still in my grandfather's old jewelry box. Inside were deeds, surveys, brittle as onion skin, but real. There, in a shaky hand on a survey from 1953. Property includes entire cove and lake bed 50 feet from shore. It hit me like cold water protected, not just the land, but the water too. Next day, I took everything to the county clerk, this old guy with bifocals who looked like he'd seen every dirty trick in the book. He checked signatures, nodded at the survey. "This is the real deal," he said. "Your grandfather bought the lake, not just the land." Relief crashed over me. All that anxiety gone. I called Brenda, left a message. "I have the information you asked for. See you at the next HOA meeting." The game had changed. I wasn't playing defense anymore. The day of the meeting, I walked into that cold, fluorescent-lit community center, binder in hand. Brenda sat at the head of the table, queen of nothing, flanked by her board. She tried to make it sound like my problem was a small matter. I set the record straight, laid out the deed, the survey, the note from the surveyor. Brenda tried to wave her fancy map, said my documents were outdated. I pulled out my trump card, a sworn affidavit from the county clerk confirming everything. The other board members looked like they'd just seen a ghost. Brenda, red-faced, stammered about developers and community assets. I just said, "Facts are facts, Brenda. This land, this water, it's mine." That should have been it. But people like Brenda don't fold easy. The next day, the HOA email list lit up with rumors Brenda claiming my docs were fakes. The clerk was crooked, all of it. The board turned on her, demanded her resignation. My new friend Sarah, a quiet neighbor who'd watched it all, filled me in. An emergency meeting was called. Brenda tried to accuse me of fraud, said I'd forged maps and manipulated county officials. I stood up, played a voice recording with permission from the county clerk explaining in detail that my deed was legal, the survey valid, the lake bed mine. Brenda's face drained of color. One board member stood up, said, "Brenda, it's time you resigned." That was that she was out, new elections called, the community free at last. But, that kind of bitterness doesn't go quietly. Brenda started slow rolling her boat past my cove, snapping photos, spreading rumors that I was a recluse, a hoarder, dumping trash in a lake anything to turn folks against me. Sarah and I threw a party, invited everyone. I made my grandfather's chili. People saw for themselves me cabin was clean, the lake was pristine, and I was just a guy who loved a little peace and quiet. The rumors fizzled. Brenda's final move was pure spite. I came home one day to find a cheap Lakefront for rent sign on my dock, her number scribbled on it. That was the last straw. My new lawyer, Maria, tough as nails, filed a restraining order. Brenda was officially barred from bothering me or my property. After that, she faded into the background, just another bitter face steering clear of my side of the lake. Months later, the new HOA president, Tom, came by with a binder of a mailspur. Brenda knew all along that my property was off limits. She'd lied, gambled, and lost everything. The HOA even made me a custom sign. Alex Property Private Lakefront, all rights reserved. I put it at the end of my drive. Now, people wave when they pass. I'm no longer the outsider, I am part of the community. Funny thing is, the fight was never really about land or lake rights. It was about what it means to truly belong, to stand your ground, and to protect a legacy. My grandfather always said the real value of a place is the memories you make and the peace you find there. He was right. I sit on the dock at sunset now, the lake calm and gold, and I know I did right by him. That's worth more than any piece of paper. But tell me, Hat, would you have done in my shoes? Was I too stubborn or just fighting for what was right? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about justice, about home, about how far you'd go to protect what's yours. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That after Brenda was ousted and the community started waving at me instead of whispering behind my back, everything just snapped back to the way it was. Truth is, when you go up against someone who's built their whole identity around control, they don't just melt away, they haunt the place like a stubborn storm cloud. And Brenda? She was a thunderhead, if there ever was one. For a while, things felt pretty good. I'd walk down to the dock in the early mornings, coffee in hand, mist curling off the lake, and actually breathe easy. The new board even sent a handwritten apology, signed by every member, along with a gift card to the local hardware store. Tom, the new president, even offered to help me patch up the old dock, but I turned him down. There was something sacred about that crooked pile of timber, It was built with real sweat, stubbornness, and love. You don't replace that with composite decking and city permits. But Brenda, she found new ways to make her presence felt. She'd cruise by in her pontoon, sunglasses glinting, camera always pointed right at my place. If I waved, she'd just pretend not to see me. Some mornings, I'd wake up to find tire tracks near my mailbox, like someone had circled around after dark. The pettiness wasn't even subtle. Rumors started cropping up again. First, it was that I was running an illegal Airbnb. Then I was secretly planning to build a water park for profit. And my personal favorite, that I was selling catfish from the lake to restaurants in the city. You know what I mean? The kind of gossip only the bored and bitter bother to repeat. Still, most of the neighbors didn't buy it. Sarah and her husband became regulars at my place, bringing over pie and stories about the Bluff's old days, when Brenda was just another new face on the board before she went full dictator. A few others stopped by, too. Some even apologized for how they'd acted, saying they never knew the real story and that they were tired of walking on eggshells. That meant more to me than any official apology. Of course, Brenda couldn't stand the idea of losing. She took her obsession to a whole new level. One evening, I came home to find a for sale sign stuck right at the edge of my drive, complete with her number and a made-up listing private lakefront lot. Great investment, call Brenda. I was so angry, I nearly ripped it out with my bare hands. Instead, I snapped a photo, called Maria, my lawyer, and just said, it's starting again. Maria actually laughed and said, good thing we've got that restraining order, Alex. Next time she crosses the line, let the sheriff handle it. But I never wanted to be that guy, the one always calling lawyers and deputies, turning the quiet lake life into a never-ending courtroom drama. That's not why I moved out here. So instead, I started inviting folks over more often, made it a point to show them the truth, how the place was kept, how clean the water was, how I wasn't building condos or selling catfish or anything else Brenda dreamed up. There was this one afternoon sun just about as set, kids laughing on the dock, Sarah pouring lemonade, and for a split second I thought, maybe this is what winning feels like. Then came the twist I never saw coming. Tom showed up at my door, binder in hand, eyes downcast. He handed it to me and said, I think you need to see this. Inside were emails sold, incriminating emails between Brenda and the original developer. Turns out, Brenda had known the legal boundaries all along. She'd been told point blank that my cove wasn't part of the Bluffs, that the developer had purposely left it out, respecting my grandfather's legacy. She just thought she could bully me into giving it up anyway. I'll be honest, reading those messages, seeing how far she was willing to go made my skin crawl. It was never about the rules, never about the good of the community. It was all ego, all hunger for power. Tom apologized again, promised the board would cover my legal costs, and offered to put up a permanent sign, something official, right at the top of my drive, private property. Lake rights reserved. Established 1952. I agreed, mostly for the peace of mind. After that, something shifted. People started coming by just to chat, swap stories, ask for fishing tips, or share beer on the porch. The invisible wall that had always stood between me and the Bluffs finally came down. Even the folks who'd been on Brenda's side before were friendly. Some admitted they were just scared to speak up until someone else did. Guess everyone needs a little reminder that standing your ground doesn't have to mean standing alone. Brenda, for her part, faded into the background. The new board kept things simple, reasonable, fewer fees, less nitpicking. The lake felt lighter. On good days, I'd sit by the water and think about my grandfather, how proud he'd be, not just that I kept the cabin, but that I fought for it with more brains than fists. Sometimes I even felt a twinge of sympathy for Brenda, believe it or not. She'd spent so much energy trying to take something that wasn't hers, she forgot how good it feels to belong. So now, when the sun hits the water just right, and I see neighbors out on their boats waving, I realize this is what home is. It's not just a plot of land or a name on a deed. It's the people, the peace, and the battles you fight to keep them both safe. And yeah, maybe a little drama, too. Wouldn't be lake life without it. But what about you? Have you ever had to stand up for your home, your family, or your peace of mind? Would you have fought, or just let it go? Drop your thoughts down below. Let's keep this conversation rolling, because sometimes the best way to protect your story is to share it.